Hey, what's up? Oh, Don, man, how are you? I sound sleepy, huh? Well, I was out looking at a band last night in San Diego. Oh, you got some new songs, huh? Well, cool, man. When are you gonna play them for me? Tomorrow. Well, I guess I could stop by on my way up from San Diego. I could just stop by the South Bay and we could hang out before I head back to LA. Oh, cool, man. So you wrote a song about me? That's going to be interesting. Gonna have to. I can't wait to hear the story. What's it called? Into the Fire. Wow. Well, that's a spicy title, man. And what else? You got more than that? Oh, you got this song, a ballad called Alone Again. Well, cool. I can't wait to hear it. Have you played it for George? Oh, he says he doesn't want to do a ballad on Tooth and Nail. Well, one ballad's a good thing, man. I'll work with him on that. All right, Don. Cool. How am I going to get into your house? Last time I had to crawl through a window. Can you just, like, please leave the back door open? And the credit card trick. Well, I guess I could try that. All right, Don, I'll be by, man, and I'll call you first if you don't answer. I'll figure out a way to get in. All right, Don, I'll see you soon. It's January of 1983. I'm working with Don on his new songs for his album Tooth and Nail that will be coming out shortly. And I'm pretty excited, man, because you've got this amazing metal shredder, George Lynch, with Don Dawkins' amazing vocal melodies and his voice. And then you got Jeff Pilson on bass and Mick Brown on drums. It's a very powerful band. I like to stay down at this, there's this place called the La Jolla Cove Motor Inn, and it's kind of a rustic cinder block kind of motel, but it's right in front of the cove where everybody hangs out. I like to get up in the morning after being up late all night watching bands play. I do that a lot. I go out almost every night to see bands play, looking for like the next big thing. So I went to see some band in San Diego last night. Don called me at 1 a.m. He wants me to stop by his house. And when I go to his house, I never know how I'm going to get in. Sometimes I got to crawl through a window if he leaves a window open. Hopefully he'll leave the back door open. But he's got this thing called the credit card trick that he showed me. So if he doesn't leave a window open or the back door, I'm going to find a way to get in to Don Dawkins' house to hear these new songs, including one he said he wrote about me. I'm excited about that. I gotta go back to bed. It's January of 1983. I was in San Diego last night seeing a band called Halfway Home. They had a gig down there and I wanted to see them live because I'm in the final throes of deciding whether to sign them or not. Anyway, Don woke me up at my hotel room at about 1 and he told me he had some new songs to play for me for Tooth and Nail, and I'm kind of excited to hear them. But he said, why don't I just stop by his house on my way back from San Diego up to LA. He lives in the South Bay, so here I am. And he said he was going to leave this window open for me. Well, typical Don Dawkins, he forgot to leave the window open for me. It's a good thing he said to check his back door, and he said something about a credit card works. I'm going to go check it. Well, I made it to the back door. I got my fingers crossed that he left it open, but he did give me permission to break in if I have to, and it won't be the first time. Let's see. Oh man, it's locked again. One time I had to break a window because I couldn't get this to work, and then he showed me a way to do it. So you just take a credit card and you slip it in. You slip it in like that, and I heard a click, so I'm thinking it's going to open. Let's see if it opens. And that should, there we go. It should get me into his mudroom. In. Woo! Man, that was a rocking track. Well, I made it in through the mudroom. I went to Don's bedroom, and he was still sleeping. So he told me if he was sleeping that he had a drawer in the kitchen that had some cassettes in it. So I pulled a drawer out and figured I'd just sit on the floor and listen through them. I've heard some pretty cool ideas. I think I heard the song that he says is about me, and it had some words in it about weaving a spell. And all I can think of is that I told him the story about this relationship that just busted up, and I think he's like trying to say she was like a witch and she put a spell on me or something like that. But I also heard this really pretty ballad, and I think that's the one that he's talking that George won't play on, but I got to work with George on that because we need that song. It could be like a big hit. Don's calling it Alone Again, and I heard it in there, and I was just listening to, the last thing I listened to before I pulled the headphones off was this headbanging song, and I think that's the title track. At least we think we're going to call the album Tooth and Nail. But I found this, and this is kind of cool. I gave Don an advanced copy of the Shout at the Devil cassette, and I don't know if laying here in the drawer means that he never listened to it. He just threw it in the drawer, if he actually listened to it. And I guess this is an important drawer because Don keeps his ideas on the cassette tapes. But I found a first-class American Airlines ticket in a fancy folder, and I don't know of any trip he's taken, but it's an unused ticket, so I guess he plans on going somewhere. And I'm going to listen to some more of this music until I hear Don stirring, and then I'm going to go, and he's probably going to want to go eat, but I'm going to definitely try to get him to at least play me into the fire and tell me why it's about me, about some woman weaving a spell. But I'm going to play some more songs right now. Wow, what an amazing flashback to 1983. I had so much going on. I mean, we had the pre-release of Shout at the Devil coming out. Tom Werman and Jeff Workman were going to go in and do the Dokken album Tooth and Nail. Don was writing songs, and I was going down to the South Bay to listen to Don play songs for me, and a lot of the times he would forget to leave the back door open, and I'd have to find an open window somewhere on his house to get in. And that didn't work one time, and I couldn't wake him. I thought he was dead. I couldn't wake him up. And so I ended up coming back up to Hollywood. And so I said, we got to figure this out because I don't want to drive an hour down to the South Bay and an hour back with nothing productive happening. So anyway, he showed me the credit card trick. And that way I could open up his back door and get in no matter what. And some of my favorite memories are going down to the South Bay, sitting on a chair in Dokken's bedroom, and he's like wrapped up in the covers, and he's telling stories, and he's cracking jokes. And he used to do this thing where he did a Donald Duck voice, and so I would ask him a question, and he would answer in Donald Duck voice. So you can imagine how funny that might have been. But this one particular time, I was down in San Diego on a trip to hear a band, and I stopped by the South Bay and ended up having to use the credit card trick to get in. And he told me if he was asleep, he had a bunch of cassettes to go through, and I went through them, and I heard a lot of his ideas. But when he finally woke up, I was like, Don, what is this into the fire, weaving a spell and mesmerizing and all this stuff? And he goes, well, you told me the story of how you got this big check on Motley Crue, and you were at a bowling alley, and the next thing you know, this girl has lured you in, you know? And I said, yeah, it was kind of like she knew I'd just gotten a big check or something. And he was like, well, she was no good for you. I told you, if not 10, 100 times to get away from her. And then in the end, it just ended up in a pile of shit. And what he's referring to is sometimes, you know, you're drawn into something that's a fire that can destroy you, can destroy your relationship and all that kind of stuff, even destroy your life. And that relationship ended one morning when she was in some kind of a fit of rage. I was sound asleep, and the next thing I know, I feel something piercing me, and she was beating me with a sharp stiletto heel. And it ended up with her getting all her stuff and throwing it outside the apartment. And that's what he wrote that song about. And he said, this is a cautionary tale that when two people are together and they need to, you know, get away from each other before something bad happens. But back to the rest of this record, Tooth and Nail. So Don had this ballad, this song Alone Again. And I know most of you have heard this song because it's such a great song. It was a big song for Don. It was one of the big hits. And George didn't want to play on it because he thought it was too wussy, you know, it was just too lame. And I remember having a lot of conversations with Cliff Bernstein and Peter Mensch at Q Prime, who managed Dokken. And between them and I, we found a way to get George to play on it. And it's epic, you know. Like, the thing is that George and Don needed each other to make it great. And in my opinion, they still need each other to make it great. And I caught up with Don a little over 2 years ago on the Kiss cruise, and Dokken were playing, and Lynch Mob were playing, which was George's band after he left Dokken. And they would do 3 songs together, and that magic was still there. It's just the weirdest thing because Don and George literally, I think, hate each other, but it's like they love each other because of what they created, but they hate each other on a personal level. But it's the chemistry, you know. It's that that edgy metal shredder melodic soul of George's with, you know, Don's romantic, operatic, beautiful melodic vocals. And so when you put those two things together, it kicks ass. And once a friend of mine was telling me about REO Speedwagon and how it was really about, you know, Kevin Cronin was like the Don Dokken, and Gary Richrath was like the George Lynch, and those guys never got along, but it was their friction that made that band great. And when Gary Richrath left, I mean, REO Speedwagon was never the same. And I think the same goes for Dokken. When George Lynch left, I mean, George went on to have hits with the Lynch Mob, but, you know, Don, I think he really needed George to make that thing fly. And so, you know, Tooth and Nail, the title track, you know, Don didn't like that song much, but he put his heart and soul into it the same way that after, you know, some long conversations with George between Cliff and Peter and I, George finally put his all into it, and that's why that song is great today. There was also Just Got Lucky on that record. It's another great song. I mean, there are a lot of great songs on that record, and I remember the art director, you know, finding that monster claw from, like, it looked like it was, you know, from that movie about that, the lagoon, the creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, it looked like the claw of that thing. And I think it, you know, really was a great visualization of Tooth and Nail, you know, that claw ripping it apart. But, and I heard George Lynch say this recently, and, you know, another great album is the Beast from the East, which is a double live vinyl of Dokken live from Japan. And, you know, it's an interesting thing because, you know, George once told me that he felt that that was like Dokken's best effort because they were at the pinnacle of their cohesiveness. And again, this is before everything shattered. You know, they'd done a few big tours. They had opened for bands like Aerosmith. And he said that he and Don would dissect you know, the headliners and what made them great and their stage presence and their moves and all that kind of stuff. And so by the time they did their headline tour, they had learned from all the people that they had opened for. And I think that's an interesting self-reflection. And when I said to George, I said, well, what do you think that the best, you know, Dokken record is? He goes, I think it's the Beast from the East, the live record from Japan. And I kind of chuckled because one of my favorite records is that Made in Japan Live by Deep Purple. And that live Dokken record, The Beast from the East, is pretty freaking good. In fact, I think it's got a reissue for Record Store Day that's coming up here in a couple of months. Anyway, please like, follow, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.